Okay guys, today we're going to be working on 97 VF750 Honda Magna. We're going to be doing fork bushings, seals, see how everything looks in there. I just redid these about a year ago. I did not replace the bushings at the time. I was kind of short on time, wanted to get back out on the road, and that was a big mistake because now they're shot. Alright, so we're going to get in there and see what they look like. First step is we're going to get it up off the ground. If you have a lift, a jack, whatever. I have this Harbor Freight lift. It does the job. It's really awesome. For the price, you can't beat it. I would suggest not doing any front fork work unless you have something real stable like this that can hold the bike upright, because there is no center stand on this bike. So if you have a bike with a center stand, it's a lot easier. This bike doesn't have one, so we're gonna make it work. We're basically just gonna put a jack right under the middle here. The back tire, as you can see, is strapped in on both sides level, so it's not going to go anywhere. So we're going to raise this up right here, and we're going to take the front end off. And so let's get started. Okay, as you can see, we're lifting off the frame rail here. We're not going to lift off the oil pan because you will pop a hole right through it. It's just aluminum. The frame is steel. That's fine to lift off of. I have this well secured in the rear, as you can see. That's why I'm lifting off one side only. It really doesn't matter if it's secured. If you don't have that back tire secured, don't do this, because the bike will do that. So you can get a lift that will actually fit under these frame rails. You can do it that way. I have the lift. That's what I prefer to use. I've done these on the ground before. Really good to have a helper there to kind of steady the bike in case it moves around, because you can and will knock it over, because when you get up to doing this stuff, you're going to be yanking and pulling and hammering on this pretty good. So always have a buddy around, unless you have a lift like this where you can strap it in real good. Alright, let's move on here. So now you can see I have tire up off the ground, just enough so you can sneak it out from here. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We're going to disconnect the brakes. Basically, you're going to take these two bolts out here, slide the caliper out of the way, hang it up. Okay, got the brake caliper unbolted. We're going to take the brake hose out of this little stay here. You may have to pry it out a little bit. We're going to take this, we're going to get this out of our way. I have forward control, so I can just throw it right in there and it'll stay there. If you don't have, bungee cord around here works. Wherever you have to do, just get it out of your way. Alright, now if you look down here, you'll see a screw right here. We're going to take that out. That's your speedo cable. Okay, with that screw out, we're just going to pull this out. That's your speedometer drive. Just hook that out of your way as you did before. Now you should have nothing connected to the wheel other than your axle here. And as you can see, you have these 4 bolts here, which are actually the pinch bolts for your axle. And this is your keeper bolt on the end. So before we loosen these, we're going to loosen this first. So go ahead and take that out. Okay, with that keeper bolt out, now we're going to go ahead and take these out. Real simple. Take them out. If you have one of these, it's awesome. Take all these out. Okay, now your front axle should be free. You can see this little hole right here. And what that's for, or at least what I think it's for, how I've always done it, is you get a screwdriver. See, it fits in there perfectly into that hole. And you just twist this like that. And you just pull that axle right out. Okay, with the axle out, the wheel's going to drop down. You want to make sure that you don't lose this or that. I just keep everything right on the wheel. Just take the wheel off, put it out of your way. Okay, everything should look pretty free like this. We want the fender off now because we're going to take these individual tubes off. You have these Allen bolts right in here. Take those 4 out. Those 4 bolts out. The fender just slides straight down out of here, and there's got 2 little brackets on either side. All you have to know is that the plain one goes on passenger side. Well, I guess you'd say the right side of the bike, passenger side in a car, and then you have I don't know where I set it, this one here. It's got the little brake stay on it that goes on this side over here, which would be driver's side, left side of the bike. Okay, now you should have two bare forks hanging down about like this. These little dust seals here need to come off. So what we're going to do is get a very small screwdriver. Be careful and just work your way around it. I'll show you that in a minute. Okay, these are pretty pliable, so they come up relatively easy, unless you have a bike that's had these in there for quite a long time, in which case they may fight you, and you should probably replace them anyways if they're in there that long. These I just put in last year. We're going to try and reuse these if we can. See, they pop out pretty easily. Just slide them up out of your way. Do the same thing over here. Just a seal to keep rocks and dirt and crap out. Alright, now if we can see down in here, I don't know how good of a, there, that one you can see better. There's a retaining ring right here. And you can get a little screwdriver in there and just pop that up just like that. Do that on the other side. Real simple. And there's a slot in that. You can just pull it off if you want, leave it on, doesn't really matter. I like to pull them off to get them out of my way. Just don't yank it, because you're going to scratch your fork tube. So spread it with your fingers, take it off. Don't just like pull it and let it scratch the tube. You want to spread it and just take it off that way. Okay, so those are off. Alright, so these seals, the way we're going to do it, the way the factory tells you to do it, the way I like to do it, it's a little harder. We're going to take them out by banging them out. Inside here you have, there's a bushing right here, and there's a bushing on the end of this that sits down here. This bushing down here is actually a larger diameter, or maybe about the same, I would say, than this one, but this one can't pass this one. Now that we have the snap ring out and the seal has nothing holding it in, if we pull down on this one, it'll force this out like a slide hammer. But the cartridge is still bolted in here, so we can't do that just yet. What we're going to do is come down under here. If you can see up in there, there's an Allen bolt in there. Take this Allen bolt out. That is actually doubling as your fork drain, so make sure you have a drain pan underneath. Sometimes it could be a little stubborn. A long Allen bit, if you have it, or an Allen key, you know, something just through here to hold it from turning, usually works. Occasionally they'll come loose and then the whole thing will turn inside. If that happens, then we're just going to proceed to the next step, and I'll show you what to do there. So I'm going to go ahead and take this one out now. Okay, next step, I have both of those draining. That's fine. If you can't get them out, you can't get them out. But the next step would be, we're going to take these caps off here. There's a spring under each one that's under pressure. Do not take these off ever unless you have all the weight off the forks like I have here. If it's sitting on the front wheel or anything, you take this off, you're going to lose an eye because it comes out real fast. Take all the weight off, there's only a little bit of pressure. Unscrew the cap almost all the way and just keep your hand over it so that it doesn't fly out on you. When they're completely decompressed, there is maybe about an inch of pressure on them, so it's not too bad to deal with. Okay, once you have this cap off, you're going to have this spacer here that pops up. As you can see, that's how much spring pressure is on that cap. So there's a decent amount. You're going to take your spacer out, which, as you can see, is hitting my bar, so I'm going to have to loosen these and move them back slightly. Okay, now that I move my bars back a little bit, we can pull this spacer out. Probably won't have to do that if you have stock bars. Maybe, maybe not. But we're going to take that out. We're going to lay everything out exactly how we took it out, so that we don't confuse anything. Now if you look down inside here, see if I can get my phone in there. gonna be hard to see it, but what we're gonna do is use a magnet, coat hanger, magnet, piece of wire, anything you can get down in there to just grab that spring. You're gonna have a washer on top between the spacer. We're gonna set that down here so we don't confuse where it goes. And we're gonna pull the spring out. Okay, and now take notice of how the spring is. When we pull it out, see you have wide on the top, small on the bottom. They call that a progressive spring. Sometimes it'll be wide all the way down. Sometimes it'll be like this. Sometimes it'll be different diameters. You might have a bike that has like 3 or 4 different size springs with spacers and everything else. Just always lay it out exactly how you took it out. Put our cap over here. That way, when it goes back in exactly the same, and you don't have any problems. Alright, so now that that's out, we're going to repeat, do the other side, same thing. Alright, now that you have your springs, your spacers, everything removed, all the compression is off your suspension. Alright, at this point, if you were able to get these 2 bolts out of the bottom, we can move on. If not, what you're going to have to do is down in the bottom here, there's a, how would I describe it, like a star-shaped socket on the end of the cartridge here. Usually what I do to get that out, I'm not going to go through the whole process here because I don't have to do it on this bike. But simply put, you're going to get a bolt head that fits into that star down in the bottom. It's usually around a 19 or 18 millimeter. And then you thread a nut or something onto it and weld them together. So you're going to have a bolt with a head on either side of it. And you're going to stick that down in there, and then you're going to get a long extension with a socket that's going to hold that. There's a special tool they make. It's like $180. I've done it with just welding a nut on both sides of a bolt, and it works just as well. You get a long extension with a socket. Tape the bolt in there so it doesn't fall out, and you're going to run it down in here, and you're going to hold that cartridge from turning, and then take this bolt out of the bottom. But since with our spring pressure still on these came out very easily, I didn't have to do that. We can move on. Alright, so with the springs out, your clip's removed, all that we have left is the seal and the bushings underneath it. So what we're going to go ahead and do is, this should slide up and down pretty easily here. And you can hear the cartridge inside. Now this one is actually giving me quite a bit of tension to move. You can see it should slide really easily, and this one's not, so that leads me to believe that my guess these bushings are cracked or bad. See, this one moves nice and free. That bushing's probably good. This one here is really sticking. So that would be, yeah, that's exactly why I'm having a problem. The initial problem, and the reason I'm doing this, is that it drove fine for a good 2 seasons after I did the seals the first time and the fluid change. I got about a season and a half out of it. We're in August about now. Going down the road the other day, it just started feeling real stiff, like there's nothing in the suspension, like I was riding a rigid. And that would be why, because that's not moving anymore. So what we're going to do now is basically just get a rag or something you can hold on to this easily with. You could actually put a bolt, if you get a bolt that's the same size as these, through there and use a rubber mallet, tap them down. That works too. What I like to do is just take the axle bolt, stick it in there, and just grab a hold of it and just yank down on these. And as you're yanking down, it's going to force this seal up until the whole thing comes right off. And we'll come back when I get one off here. Okay, that took me about 3-4 good yanks, and it popped right off. You can see the seal pushed up, your washer, your outer bushing, your inner bushing. Now you can see here, this inner bushing should have a gray Teflon coating over it all the way around. I'll show you the new ones when we put them on. And you can see that Teflon is almost completely gone. So that's just about beat, and that's why we're getting that sticking. And take a look down in here. Doesn't look scored or anything, so that's good. If anything in there is scored or damaged, you're just going to have more issues, and you're probably going to have to replace the lower leg. But that one doesn't look bad. I think I caught it early. Okay, so since we could just slide this up. Now, if you have any rust up here or anything, which this bike doesn't, there's different ways to polish it out. But when you get pocks and pitting and stuff, it's going to damage this seal. So you really don't want to be sliding. You usually don't get them where the seal rides, but unless it's like the bike's been sitting for ages, and it's not a lot you can do but replace the upper in that case. But on this one, I can just slide it right up because it's clean. We're just going to get rid of it out of our way. If you have one that's just got a little bit up here and you don't want to damage your seal, take an old milk jug and just cut a flap, a real thin flap of plastic, and just slide it in between the seal, and you can move it up and down on here, and the milk jug's going to get scored up instead of your seal, because the seal has a little bit of room to expand. That's also a nice trick for when you put these seals on, because you're going to have to slide it down. As you can see, there's a little pitting up here, but you have to slide the whole seal all the way down when you put these seals onto these. So now you can even do it. I don't even take the forks off the bike half the time because it's easy to do. Some of these, like these, as you can tell, once you get your bushings out of your way, you can actually slide the seal on from the bottom, so you can save yourself all the time of taking that off. So what we're going to do here now, when I'm done yapping here, we're just going to split these with a screwdriver and take all that right off. Okay, as you can see, there's pretty much, that's the outer coating, and that's the inner coating on this one. They're pretty well toast. There's not left of that Teflon left on there. I mean, they weren't to the point where it was starting to wear the brass. Well, maybe that one was. But we're still looking good here, so I think we'll get away with just swapping these out. Okay, I've gone ahead and pulled the cartridge out of the leg here, so you can see kind of what it looks like. Now, this particular model, there is no star in there, as you can tell. Some Hondas, I noticed, they like to be sneaky little a-holes and not put this on. So if you can't get that bolt out of the bottom, you're pretty well screwed. The only known fix that I know to get those out is you sharpen a broom handle or something to that extent, just a long wooden rod, and you whack it down into that hole, and that's your wrench to hold this thing. And it's a big pain in the ass sometimes to get these out. Alright, we're going to go with the All Balls Racing rebuild kit for the forks. You get pretty much everything but the seals and the wipers. I'm not replacing the seals and wipers because I just replaced them. They're in good shape yet. We're able to reuse them. Now, they give you this nice little sticker here. I have quite a few of those around. You get your outer bushings, you get your inner bushings, and then they give you an assortment of O-rings and copper washers depending on what application, because it just goes by the size of the fork, not really the manufacturer of the bike. So it could fit how many different bikes, I don't really know. But we're going to only use what we need to on this bike, and the rest of it you just toss it out because it's just extra. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to take our old ones here, and we're going to match them up, make sure they're right, which hopefully, if I ordered correctly, Yahtzee, everything looks good there. You get a new set of clips. I don't think I need them, but we're going to use them anyway. Sometimes when you get into these, they're really rusty and they snap and fall apart, so it's good to have extras. You have extra copper washers, which actually go on these little bolts that we took out of the bottom where all the fluid drained out. That's your sealing point. We're going to replace those. And then you have O-rings for your caps that you took off on the top. That's what those are for. And then you have little O-rings here and there for whatever style bike you might have. You know, like I said, they don't all fit this bike. It's whichever ones you need. It's a universal kit. Alright, I'm going to show you right here the difference between new and old. We got the new on the left, old on the right. See, there's a nice Teflon coating on the new ones. The old ones, you can see it's pretty much gone, and that's what helps everything ride nice and smooth in there. Alright, first thing up, last thing you took off. Seal's still on, wiper's still on. We're going to put the washer on, and then our outer bearing, then our inner bearing is going to go and just snap right into place like that, and that holds everything on. Okay, and we're going to take, always want to check this when you have the bike apart, this little, it's almost like a piston ring, make sure that's not all scored up. I've never really had to replace those very much because they're always bathed in oil. It's not really a wear part. That's the, it slides up and down in here with the spring. This part is the part that wears because that's where all the weight is on it. So this one looks good. We're going to reuse it. You can go out and buy special tools to do all this stuff, which if you do it every day, I would recommend probably doing that. I do fork seals maybe once or twice a month, if that. I work on quite a few bikes. This actually is a cheap, effective alternative to buying the actual tool, and it works just as well. Basically, you need a clamshell. This is a piece of PVC pipe. I just cut it in half. Get whatever size fits on your fork. Like that. You're just gonna clamshell it right around your fork. Get a couple of hose clamps on there. Just a regular radiator hose clamp. And you're gonna, that's gonna be your one tool, and I'll show you how to use that in a minute. And then your other tool, you can make out of this, a milk jug. What you're basically gonna do is just cut a flap out of the milk jug, and I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so we cut ourselves a nice little plastic flap out of the milk jug. And if you can see, it wraps right around there. Cut yourself a long enough piece to get all the way around it. And that'll help us get the seal over this stuff right here without tearing it. And basically what you're going to do is just put that right over there. Put some front end grease on there, just some red, just regular wheel bearing grease. Anything will work really, just any kind of lubricant, oil even. And I'm going to take the seal off here and show you how to do this. Now, what you're going to do is get it inside the seal lip like this, and you just push the seal up over it so it acts as a barrier to protect the seal lip. And once you get it all the way up, you can see it goes right through there. That keeps your seal from ripping on this here. And then once you got it on, you can just pull your seal down off of it. Kind of hard to do one-handed here. But now the seal's on, you can see as it's pushing the dirt up that it's a nice tight seal. Always have a little bit of oil on there, grease or something, so you're not running the seal dry up and down. Alright, now that that's on, you can put your seal washer. There's a rounded side and a flat side. Always put the flat side toward the bearing, rounded side up. Or the bushing, not the bearing, the bush. As the Europeans call it, the bush. Which I think is a little pornographic, but us Americans call it the bushing. So we go like that. We're going to put washer, outer seal, your bushing, and then the inner bushing, and that holds everything together. Okay, now what we're going to do, if you remember showing you this, we're going to clamp this on under the seal over top of the washer. Want to make sure when you make this piece, it doesn't have to be any particular length. I use just, you know, about 6 inches worth, but you want to make sure that at least one edge of it here is very square, and we're going to hook that up. Okay, now you want to make sure your fork leg is good and cleaned out, nice and shiny and smooth in there, no weird stuff going on. Right where the bushing sits, you're gonna have a little bit of scratching just from putting them in and out. That's fine, because it rides on the inside. If there's any really bad corrosion, you're going to want to clean that up so your seal goes in better. This one's not too terrible. So that's ready to go on. I use brake clean to clean these out. You can use soapy water, pretty much anything that works for you. Basically, the main thing is you want to make sure you get all your sludge and anything out of here. Like I said, soapy water, brake clean, a rag. Just make sure that when you're done, you blow it out with compressed air, clean it out with clean rag, anything. Just make sure there's nothing in there. It has to be very clean and dry. You're going to make sure this is your spacer that goes on here. Sometimes they'll stay on there. That one will. If not, you can just throw it in the bottom here, but that has to go back in. So I have this set up. This is on. This is ready to go. That's tightened up. Now what we're going to do is we're going to fit this onto here. Nice and smooth. Make sure that washer drops in. Okay, and then you'll be able to see down in here. I'm just going to lightly hammer on this like a slide hammer. Just going to push that bushing down into where it wants to go. And you'll be able to tell when it's about good, because you can see the slot for the snap ring, and you got about a ½ inch of space for the seal. Now, as you can see, as I'm hitting it now, this is sliding upwards. That means I'm probably about bottomed out on that bushing. So what we're going to do is take this off, slide the seal down to this side of it, and then put this back on. Okay, I've switched the seal down here. This is back in place. You're going to put a little light coating of fork oil on here just to give it a nice smooth ride. We're going to start that in there, and all we're going to really do is just, whoops, put that back in there. I always start it first so it goes in nice and straight. We're just going to tap this ever so gently. Just give it a couple gentle taps, and just keep turning this around as you go. Make sure it goes nice and easy. Get it nice and easy and smooth. And eventually you just keep looking down in there as you're going. You should start to see that notch for the snap ring show on the other side. See, now we can see it. So that means we're done. Alright, snap ring. We're going to put that on. Spread it with your fingers. Don't try to just shove it on there because it'll scratch. Alright, we're going to take our small screwdriver, snap that down into place. You can see now it's sitting in the grooves here. Okay, now our fork should move nice and smooth, and you can hear it bottoms out nice. Okay, we can go ahead and take this back off. Okay, with our tool removed, we can take our wiper and slide it back down, and just a little bit of finger pressure is all you need. That just pops right in there. Doesn't sit in there very tightly, so you don't have to go crazy. Just till it bottoms out. Okay, and then you should have nice, smooth moving forks now. Okay. Now remember, I did one fork at a time. You can do two at a time, doesn't matter. I do one fork at a time because that is different than that, and if you switch them, you're gonna have a nightmare every time switching them out again. Not a nightmare of a time, but you know what I mean. Extra work. Nobody likes to do extra work. So one at a time. You don't confuse them. Everything stays in place. Alright, now we need to get our cartridges bolted back in. So what we're going to do is pull these all the way down to the full extension. All the way out. And then our springs that we took out, we're going to put everything back in the way we took it out. Make sure before you put them in, clean them real good with brake clean, compressed air, soapy water, whatever you got to use. Get all that oil that has any little bit of the oil gets like a metallic in there. You want to get all that stuff out of there. Clean it off real good. Dry everything real good. No fuzz from shop rags or anything. You want to try to get it as clean as possible. Alright, after you go ahead and put your springs and everything back in, you got to retighten this Allen bolt in the bottom here. I like to do that before you put anything else back up in here. Just your spring, your washer, and your spacer. You can kind of tell when it gets down all the way in there because you'll have that original bit sticking out. But you have to kind of rattle this around and move the bolt around until you catch a thread, because that little cup in there has to seat in the bottom. And when you get that all seated, everything will pull in real nice. Tighten that up real good. Do that on both sides. And then you have your cartridges tightened back up. Make sure you replace those washers with the ones we got in the kit. And that's basically it for that. You're going to leave your tops open because you still have to fill your fork oil. You can go ahead and put your fender back on. Your wheel can go back in. It's basically the way that I took it apart. All your torque settings